Hey everybody, welcome to the Comeback Podcast. My name is Lauren Rose. You might recognize me from episode 6, but Ashley isn't able to be here today. So today I am hosting and we have a guest here named AJ Whipple. I'm really excited to share his story. AJ, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little about yourself and your childhood?
Yeah, thank you. I was born and raised in St. George, Utah. Typical, born and raised in the church, doing the regular stuff, a lot of outdoor stuff. My dad was Boy Scout leader, and so we were always doing outside activities. I was deacons, teachers, president, coming up in the church. As I was, raised in rural Utah, I started falling away from the church was when I started getting into high school. Mainly was from perfectionism, idealism, basically, where I have OCD big time. Like I had to do, there's like a checklist. Hey, perfect this, and that. Where, hey, if you do this, you get that. That's how I fallen away eventually was from that because it finally hit me in high school was I was a sophomore year. Leading up to that, a lot of the reasons why was I put so much pressure on myself, not really from my family, but being perfectionist. I'm like, well, I'd seen like, hey, if you put all this effort in it, and if you're doing more than the next person, then you get something back from it. A theory of like, okay, you can do this, you get a result. You get this, you get that. That's the way I approach it. I was like a 4.0 student all the way. And then finally hit where I got an A minus in a class. And so it came to a halt where it was like, what is it? It's not worth it anymore. I mean, literally like mapped out the rest of my life thinking that the world is over. I can't go to this school. I can't go to this college if I didn't have a 4.0 and being a huge honor student and stuff like that. It wasn't possible. It's not in the books. So why? And I got tired of it. It's like, all right, that's the same thing with the church. It's like, well, I keep messing up. What is it worth it? I mean, why? Why keep going? If I wasn't perfect, I wasn't worthy and thinking, oh, I can do this all on my own. I started distancing myself from the church where I was like, I thought in my mind is if I prayed hard enough that I'd have this trial or issue or taken away from me, OCD or all these thoughts that I'm not good enough. Like if I prayed hard enough, if I was good enough, it would be taken away, but it wasn't taken away. And so I was like, why am I still doing this? Why am I following the commandments? Why am I doing this? Why am I going to church? And so it came to it. My mom suffers from depression, and she's gone through that process, and she saw these warning signs. And fortunately, I was not going to school at all. I couldn't even get out of bed. I didn't even care. And back in those days, mental health wasn't that big of a deal. They figured like, oh, it's all in your head. It's all in your head. Just wake up and keep going. What's your problem? And yeah, tough it out. What is your problem? And because of my mom, I she championed me to, she put me through therapy. She got me clinical help. I was able to finally, after a while, functioning with depression and understanding these thought processes were wrong. And it's not an all or nothing. We live in a gray world that it's okay to be not perfect. It's okay to mess up. It's not the end of the world. You can still function. And so I was able to, get back into school, and fortunately, through the help of some other guidance counselors, take some, extra outside of hours and still be able to graduate. I was borderline not going to be graduating even. Fortunately, I did get some help from there, but I still kept the church at a distance because I still felt hurt that I wasn't washed clean. I didn't have this taken away. I was still having to deal with this. So why should I still go to church? And I'll keep it at a distance. It's still there. And so my morals started loosening more and more slowly. Fast forward to college, I went to.
So did you change friends? Like I imagine you had like a certain set of friends, and then did you just start kind of gravitating towards different types of people when you were
Slowly a little bit. I still have those morals where I didn't want to, drink. I didn't even drink or anything. Or prior to that, I didn't even swear. Started swearing and stuff like that. But I never participated in like parties and stuff like that. That was a total. There was no like in between group in my mind that I could see of. I was already always part of the. I played football, in athletics. And so I was always part of that group.
I see.
And I was always like the loner who was always at the gym. And so my friends were the gym. And so I didn't really have that, those people that were still in the church distance themselves from me, hurt myself even more, thinking like, well, if you're going to ridicule me for thinking this, like it made it worse actually, where I didn't want to have any more to do with the church because I'm like, you say you're doing these standards and stuff like that, and yet you're not accepting of me, of wherever I'm at, like I'm a plague. And so it pushed me even further away from the church. And so from there, it went into college where now it opened up to different groups of people. I started hanging out with different friends where my morals had started to loosen even more. And I started being open up to drink. That's when I started drinking too. I played football at Dixie State or Utah Tech now. I got open to some groups that were taking steroids. And I was like, all right, why not? I mean, it doesn't hurt. I went, why not? Go ahead and do it. Started, taking them for performance enhanced, PEDs. And I liked them. And I'm like, all of a sudden I got open to a possibility of dealing them to other people. And yeah, it just grew and grew. And then finally it hit a head where I got tired. The only reason why I was still at school was for football, and football started not being fun anymore. I was making a lot of money selling these steroids and drugs. And so I was like, why do I need to go to school if I'm already making a good amount of money and stuff like that? It's about like a sophomore. I was about a sophomore. I went to a friend's wedding out in Florida, Miami. And I wanted to change anyway. And I thought about like California, Florida, and I'd never been to Florida. I was like, all right, why not? So I went out there and I got open to the possibility of moving out there. And so before I knew it, I was like, why not? I'm young and I'm making a decent amount of money. And I see that South America is like cash king. That's all they do. And what's the hurt? And so I moved out there when I was 22. I had just turned 22. And before you knew it, all of a sudden it blew up bigger than I even thought, and hugely successful. And I was making a huge amount of money and cash, and everyone not knowing exactly what I did. I always kept people at a distance. I'd always tell them that I do import export, which they don't bat an eye out there. And they always wonder why I have so much cash. I'm like, well, it's South Florida. They don't really care. Most people carry lots of cash. There's a lot of shady things that go on there. And so I just fit in. And so it just blew up even more. And I got more and more successful. And then before I knew it, it was like 4 years had passed since moving there, and then I became like a full-blown alcoholic because I knew what I was doing was wrong morally on so many different levels, illegally. And I knew I should stop, and I couldn't stop because I got so much attention from it. I'm like, hey, well, I built this up, and the money was coming so easy that I couldn't stop. I just felt like, well, I had no support group around me that would, that knew about what I did fully, or if they did, they didn't care. They just cared me about, hey, you make a lot of money. Let's go party. Let's go to the casino. Let's go to the club. And so there's no one there to really want to stop me or tell me that, hey, whatever, you should stop. You're going down a path you can't come back, possibly. Some bad things can happen. I just got in this, I dug a hole for myself deeper and deeper that I felt like I could never come out of. I was like, I wanted to stop, and there was some signs that I probably should stop. I had a friend that got arrested he was my former roommate, and he actually got arrested in California that same year.
Oh, he was doing something totally separate out in a different state. I see.
But the same thing as what I was doing. So he'd moved from Florida and moved back out to California, and he was doing the same thing, and he got arrested. And there's if I was smart enough, or I really couldn't stop because I was so addicted to money, fame, all this stuff. And I had no one that would want it. I would listen to, at least, that would allow me to go cold turkey. That's where it got to where I wanted to commit suicide. I never really revealed it to my family because I didn't want to scare them. because if they knew fully, they'd probably jump out. But I never really that I was on the other side of the country. I mean, and I did that on purpose. I never really wanted them to know fully what I did, or let them be a part of it, because I knew what I was doing was wrong. I felt like someone was following me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was the freakiest thing. And lo and behold, yeah, I didn't. It was a DEA agent that, after I found out, I got arrested. And I was being followed. Um, and so those little weird things like and it was leading up to me being arrested. It was like 3 months prior to me being arrested that I started feeling like, and like I had anxiety attacks of people like following me. But I'm thinking, oh, it's all in my head. It's all in my head. But lo and behold, no, it was, yeah, I was being followed. And
Interesting.
I should have stopped right then and there. But honestly, that the addiction of money and fame and the world, I couldn't stop. I thought about it, but I was like, nah. There are even signs, like I said, there are signs there that I probably should stop. Otherwise, there's some. Obviously, then it happened. I did get arrested, and I should have stopped. But in the long run, I don't think, if I didn't get arrested, I it would have gotten so bad that I probably would have taken my own life, because it was so hard on me.
You're
That,
just so empty inside.
yeah, so empty in my inside, that even though I had all these, things of the world, that I felt so lonely, like ridiculously lonely, that even though that's why I was drinking so much, was to numb whatever was going on, and going to the casino and things, just doing everything in my power to not face what was really going on, and knowing that I wasn't, being fulfilled in my life, and knowing that I did what I was doing was wrong. And so that's why eventually I being arrested is probably one of the biggest blessings, is because it was getting worse and worse, even though I was on antidepressants big time, but I didn't have any like support group that could help me. The one thing that stopped me was my own family. Was I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that to my family. And how much, even though I separate myself a lot of times from them, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to do that to them. And the huge blessing that came to mind was when I finally did get arrested. It was September 23rd, 2013. I remember I have a regular routine of going to I had like a warehouse right down the street from where I lived. The previous day, I didn't get out my packages for the day. And so I had a lot of extra backed up stuff. So I got up super early, I think like 3 in the morning, and went and got all my packages that I had to go to the post office and ship off. And so I hurried and got there. And I lived in like a gated community. Went and hurried in there, walked my dog, put my car in reverse really fast. I look back and I'm like, there's someone blocking my car. I'm like, what is this guy doing? I'm like looking at my clock. I'm like, I gotta make a post office. I'm like, come on, hurry up. And I'm like, and then finally those words were like, put your hands up, uh, um, put your car back in park. They're all done in Orange County, and DEA Don's. I think it was Orange County Sheriff's, I believe, if I remember right. DEA. Most times people are like, "Oh, I'm panicking," but the weight that I had built up over so much time, that like I said, that hole, I was like, finally,
Wow.
finally, it happened, and it happened. Here I am, and here's what I finally, it relieved, a relief, because like I said, I wouldn't have stopped unless I was forced to stop. And so that's where they basically went through the procedures of, getting me out of the car, throwing the keys outside the car. And then, I was on the ground and arrested. And then we go through the house and making sure, I live with no one. So it was just my dog and stuff like that. And going through that whole procedure. And the biggest thing is, I thought to my mind, I'm like, okay, it hit me right there. I was like, this is my next phase of my life, that sometimes you're gently pushed into it, but this was like a full on, here you go. a blessing in my mind is because honestly, I would have probably given up, or I tried, like I said, I had partially harmed myself in suicidal cuttings and stuff like that just to feel, because I had numbed myself with life. And if that didn't happen, do you see what has happened now? This is your blessing. Now see what you can do with it. And from there on, I remember I went to the detention center. It was hard when they shut the doors behind you, and you're forced to basically, your freedoms are taken away. It's a privilege. It's not given to you just freely through my actions. Doing like illegal activity, that privilege was taken away. And I had always thought about, hey, this could lead to prison and like whatever, and yeah, a couple of years. It's nothing big, but finally, when it hits you, it's a whole different level. What do I do? What all these flashings of how's my life going to be panned out now? And fortunately, I was still pretty young. I was 20. I turned 26 just barely. I still have plenty of time left in my life. Realized I was like, why didn't this happen earlier? Or why didn't this happen? And there's a time and place for everything. And maybe I had to learn some more things that I wasn't prepared for. And this is a humbling experience. Stop being so prideful. You can't do this alone. You can't do this world, this life alone. Stop being so stubborn. All these things in my head. And fortunately, I had such a great family supporting me. The first person I called was my dad. I had told him there were some things leading up to this that felt weird, felt wrong, that something was weird coming along. And I prepared my dad and told him, I'm like, hey, if something happens to me with getting arrested or anything, here, plan this out and understand what to do. It was just amazing that all of a sudden, first person I called, he knew exactly what to do.
Wow.
He booked a flight out to have that support. And first person I was able to call, and like, hey, where are you guys? And all I can think of is, hey, I'm glad I'm still alive. I'm still here. To have a support system like that, because I knew later on I went through more of the prison system, how many people don't have that and how they can fall back into it. And I know why, because the recidivism is like I think it's 8%. It's ridiculous. And it's because
You have incredible parents. You really do.
yeah, I mean, my support system is probably the only reason why I'm still here, is because I would have given up a long time ago. That he came out right there in the detention center. It's all different high levels, low levels, and so you're with the worst, and so you're shackled, both arms and legs. So it was a federal. That's another blessing that I didn't realize at the time, because state is really it's hard. It's a much worse system than federal, because they don't act up when they do for federal. You don't get for federal. The thing is you don't get a lot of time off, like at all. Whereas like state, you can get like, you only have to serve like half the time, and you can get back out. And so there's a lot more crime, and there's a lot more segregation in those prisons, a lot more times. Whereas federal, you have penitentiary types. So that's where I would say where it's like a blessing that it ended up being federal, because I didn't have to deal with all this segregation of like having to deal with a shot collar, or hey, I had to do this or that. Some small blessings is I was at the detention center for about 10 days, I'd say. I had no money either, and they had no money like to put up bond or anything. A friend of mine that I met from the gym, he didn't know, he had no clue what I had done either. No one knew what I did. Very few knew to the extent of what I did. They always thought I did an import export. And then to find out you're in prison or like detention center and you're trying to get out on bond, or he put forth like the money to let me go out. Otherwise I would have stayed in. And it was an awesome friend. I still stay close to, and it's like that the small blessings that like that, and understanding that he looked more of me as a person of not what I did, but the type of person I was. And so that's what he looked on. I was so surprised of that small minor blessing of that. I was able to get out, and I was out on bond for roughly, I don't remember right, it's like 8 months. And the worst time in my life was actually that span, I would say, because I had gotten used to that lifestyle, and now I had to do drug tests nonstop. I had to go cold turkey on that. During that 8 months, that's the first time back to doing like a regular hourly job, which I was making nothing compared to obviously what I was making. So the reason why it was so hard is because it was like a cold stop of here you are. Call it is like having a spigot going full force, and then you shut it completely off. And the problem was, and I was in Florida still, so I didn't have like this support group to help me like understand what I was doing. Was like, I was drinking huge amounts, even though they were told not to do it, but I was still I'm like, it's the only thing that's keeping me going. Otherwise, I was like, problem was is like hopeless. You don't know how long you're going to be. There's no way to plan for the future because you don't know. They give you your sentence. You have no idea. I know kind of roughly, okay, I have a 36 to 48. Past that, what am I supposed to, why should I keep on living? And so that's why it was so hard, because it's like having to still see all these people. I have no money. All that was all taken away, and no more drugs. And then I'm like, okay, so I'm just having to live a regular life that I had not lived a regular life forever, but I was forced to do it now. And so that's why it was so hard. And that's where it's super close to being like committing suicide. I got to the point where all of a sudden I told my lawyer, I was like, is there any way I can go in right now? I know I'm going to serve some time, because being out here is a much worse than not knowing. And, I'd rather at least you'll go in. And he's like, no, that's not how it works. But what we can do is we can have you reassigned to out in Utah. And so I'm like, oh, okay, at least I'll have a support group. Like, cool. All right. But all of a sudden that was like 6 months already had passed. It was surprising that I made it out that. And that's why I'd say it's like one of the hardest times, is because you have no way to, what do you hope for? A lot of times you think you can hope for things coming in the future, or you can't plan for anything in the future. It's like, because you're at the will of the courts, and you're like, well, I know I'm going to serve some time. So my parents came out for my sentencing. I fully thought that, hey, I was going to go in there immediately. I ended up being sentenced to 18 months, which is ridiculous. I mean, that's a short amount of time. The prosecution, they did not like me, even though I had gone through all this stuff to try to help them, and nothing to help them. They didn't like it. And because they were pushing for more than 48 months, actually. And I was surprised that they didn't come back. And
do you know why? What in the world got you such a shorter time?
I think a lot of it was I had no history prior to any of this. I had never been arrested. I had like one speeding ticket. That was it. So my record was really nothing. I didn't get arrested with guns or anything like that. That's a huge thing that they look at. It was a nonviolent crime. And not to mention, like, my lawyer, that's another blessing that I was able to get. This lawyer, I got the lawyer from a friend up from the gym too, was a lawyer himself, just not like a trial lawyer. And he mentioned, hey, put in a good word for this guy. And he's like, he's well known. His name's like Mark Eiglarsh. I don't know if you know anything about, he's on CNN all the time. And so this highly reputable guy that I had no chance of, and I didn't have the money even to pay for much at all. And so he even discounted the rate, even to as low as he ever can do. He ended up being like, he went to bat with me against all this crap that I was dealing with, and realizing, hey, I have such a huge support group. He knew the judge too, personally. She took compassion on me, and seeing that I have a support group, and that I'm going to be going through, they have like RDAP, which is Residential Drug Addiction Program. I was going to go through that and all these things. So I think that's the reason why I I got such a short time, 18 months. So yeah.
Okay. Well, what a blessing. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I ended up having none of my family ever visited. I didn't want them to visit, um, mainly because I didn't want them to see me. Um, it's such a vulnerable spot. And another blessing was I'd met some friends from like the casino of all places that he visited me. An older guy that I didn't really have much of a relationship with him, but he had visited me, found out like what I was going through and that I was going to be assigned to it. He every week he would come visit me on Friday, or no, it was on Sundays, sorry, and just come visit me and just, have discussions for 2 hours and stuff. At the time, I didn't realize how much of it helped it did, but he always is there, and it's these small things that I don't know how I had such an impact on them, but apparently I did. And they wanted to help me out as much as possible, and so he was there. I ended up serving just like 9 months while like directly in prison. Yeah, he every week pretty much came and visited me.
Wow.
Yeah,
You still keep in touch with him?
yeah, he's a bit older. He's down. Yeah, he's still obviously in South Florida, and he had like Parkinson's, still dealing with that. So lifelong friend. I mean, yeah, it's just
Wow.
through such tribulation like that. Yeah. So
I'm sure you have a good bond with him. That's really cool.
mhm.
Love him. Did you experience like I remember reading in your summary that you read the Book of Mormon while you were in prison. So like where do you start to see like God really, enter in your life and guide you back?
It started when I was in the detention center. It hit me where I was like, "You need to get your stuff together. If this isn't a warning sign or a kick in the pants of, well, you should, going in a different direction, I don't know what else there is, because getting arrested and going to prison, there's not much other routes worse than taking basically a huge turn from where I was heading. I got into prison, and first thing I asked my parents or family to send me was a Book of Mormon. Actually, a triple combination. I never read the Book of Mormon cover to cover. Prior to that, it was piece by piece growing up. Nothing, serious. But it's hard to actually try to put into words the amount of darkness you feel while in prison, surrounding you all over the place, because you're surrounded by people that not the best. They're not the best in the world, obviously,
Yeah.
and you're always reminded of how horrible your decisions are, or you're beaten down. Basically, you did something wrong. You did something wrong. You did something wrong, and so you're beaten down all the left and right. And the only thing that helped me was I religiously, basically every day, started reading the scriptures. The only thing that really helped me like keep going is because you're surrounded by so much despair and darkness, was that continually reading the scriptures. Yeah. And I took a different approach where it's like, I need to find out if this book is true. Why not a better place than right now where I'm at? I've got the time. Why not? And so I went into it. I was like, okay, started writing things. I'm like, well, what does it mean by this? What does it mean by that? Well, full on studying, not just reading, but trying to understand and grow my own testimony of the Book of Mormon and the scriptures, and understanding like, hey, yes, this is true. I'm like, why am I feeling so much of a comfort after whatever day or how bad anything going around me, that I can look to the scriptures as a guide, a light, especially in such a dark area. And I remember so many times where I get so anxious because you're in prison, you can't do anything. You're just tied up, and you feel like so tied up that you want to do something, you can't do it. You have these conflicting things going on in your mind. The thing that helped me was reading the scriptures. It helped me calm me down and understand. I'm like, be where you're at. You're here for a reason, and be a light to not only others. There's a lot of my friends that I've dealt with. They realized I was like, oh, you're from Utah, Johnny Utah. They always call me Johnny Utah. And are you Mormon? I'm like, yeah, I'm at, yeah. Obviously, fell off the path, obviously. That's why I'm here. I'm a member. Yes, definitely. And so it was nice to, chat with them and others that to, bring them to kind of the gospel a little, or better understanding of what it is, and dispel some of their understandings of the media that, straight from the person that, a member instead. So
that I'm sure being in, like you said, such a dark place and feeling the heaviness and the sorrow of everybody there and just the darkness, and then all of a sudden having light, like there's such a contrast that it's so easy for you to see. It's so easy for you to feel because it's like flipping a switch. So that's really cool.
Yeah. So I went through that and ended up reading the triple combination, Pearl of Great Price, Doctrine and Covenants. Went through it all, and it's amazing. I'm like, how much peace that it brought me, where this inner turmoil was going on, and understanding what I did. Yes, it was bad and wrong, but as long as you fully repent and go through this repentance process, that it can be washed away. I beat myself up so many times that I didn't think I could come back, but to know that I could, it was just a comforting feeling that, hey, however far I've gone very deep and wrong in the wrong way, that there is a way out. And one of the best feelings I got was outside of Utah, most prisons there is no sacrament at all. That's one of those things, and I remember just having that opportunity for the first time. I finally got back out here, and I actually was in the halfway house for about 4 months down in Salt Lake. I had an opportunity to go to church, and it was amazing because I went to my parents' church, and I met the bishop, and I was like, I went to his office, and the first thing that he did, he hugged me, and I was like, whoa. Because you do not interact with anyone while in prison. So it was a little off. I was like, what? And the things he told me was like, hey, thank you so much for being here. Heavenly Father loves you, and you are forgiven. Emotions are really hard. You learn to get away from those emotions while in prison, but it's just a comforting feeling. One of my best pictures that I love is the one where Jesus is wrapping the lost son, or the forgotten
Prodigal son, is that?
Yeah, the prodigal son, yeah, coming back. And so a lot of times that story resonates with me a lot. It felt like so much that his arms were wrapping around me, and knowing that, hey, you're here, you made it. And to look back of how far I had gone, is I didn't think I could make it, and I did. And to be able to partake of this sacrament after so long of not being able to. Now, even nowadays, it's like I take the sacrament and understand. I look back on how there's a lot of times where you can't. I was, and I don't take that lightly. I'm like, this is something that a lot of people can't or are not able to do it, and understand, what's so precious about it. Renewing your covenants. Yeah. And so it's like, yeah.
Yeah, you don't take it for granted. That's beautiful. And honestly, I thought of the prodigal son story when you said how quickly your dad just jumped on a plane for you. Like that really got me. That's just beautiful. It really is. You are so blessed to have such incredible family.
Well, all my family is now, they're now in Salt Lake. They're not in St. George anymore. They're all up here, up north. Okay. And that's the biggest thing is, right, even nowadays, I being so far away from family and pushing them away for so long, and realizing when I got in trouble, how valuable the family is. And they're the only ones really that stuck around. I had plenty of opportunities to go somewhere else, but to this day, I value family above almost everything, and not take these other jobs for a higher pay. But no, I family is everything to me. They're through for how much they've been there for me, and they continue to be. So yeah, I got out. I was in a halfway house. I got out and was working about, I don't know, about 4 or 5 months. So I was on supervised release for 3 years, which is like parole. You're going through all these things where you're tracking everything. You have to work a full-time job, getting back into society in a sense. I had chosen to go back to Florida, which obviously sounds really dumb. Even now that I say it, yeah. And apparently I had some unfinished, things. So I ended up moving back there, and I ended up starting going back into my old ways, drinking. Yeah, imagine. I mean, after all I had gone through, and it started slowly.
So did you're at the church, you're feeling, all the love from the bishop. And then what was it that made you want to leave all of that though? Was it just the lure of the world that you were like, oh, I don't want to live this like sober life? Is that what made you want to
Yeah,
go back?
a lot of it was that lure of the world again, of like, well, I can, being again prideful, thinking I'm like, hey, maybe I can go back and back to Florida and start getting making money again and getting back on my feet and accomplished and getting more money and that like that lure of the world again, of like, hey, I can be, after I'd already been lost everything, I was like, and so that pull was on there still, and so that's what brought me back to basically Florida. And I still started going to church, and I was like, all right, well, the intentions were great to begin with, where I was like, initially I went out there thinking I'm going to help a friend out, start a business and everything. It ended up not coming to fruition. So I started going into drinking a little bit, and the whole time I forgot to mention is like, while you're on supervised release or parole, you can never move up. I was a priest and I wanted to become an elder. And I had felt like I was still it's partially what it was, being stubborn and prideful, is that I thought I had served my time. Why am I still being punished and I can't move up the church? Then, okay, fine. Then you're telling me, all right, then I guess I don't need you either. Then going back to that cycle again. Yeah. And so it started down that loop. I'm like, being that prideful of like, well, okay, well, why can't I? That was one of those small things where at the time I felt so stubborn and like, oh, I don't, why should I'm still being punished for this. Why can't I move up?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it almost didn't, you felt like it invalidated all that
Yeah.
time you spent in jail, like it didn't count.
Mm-hmm.
It probably hurt your feelings a little bit deep down that you were like, really? I feel like I get that.
Yeah. And so, and it just grew and grew. And all of a sudden I was like, well, okay, then fine. It went back to my old ways of, it was slow. And then I went back out to Florida. I try to stay, sober. I was still trying to attend church here and there. But the problem is I was skirting the line of, I can't sin and still be in the church. I'm like, well, I was drinking and I was still going to church. I was like, I've never been one to ever be a fence sitter. I was either in or all in or all out, and that kind of comes back to my OCD too. Well, I'm just gonna go with this, and we'll see where it goes. I never went back into drugs. There's no way I could, because I was being drug tested nonstop. But that was not really a hard time that I had. It was drinking and going to the casino. Casino was probably my biggest addiction, and that's where I lost like most of my money. And then drinking just comes with it, because you're like, no, it dilute whatever situation you're in, so you don't have to deal with it at the moment. So I went in that cycle of, I'm not making any money, nothing. So I was there for about, I don't know, 10 months. And I was telling my parents, I was like, man, hard living out there, wasn't making any progress. And my mom's like, well, why don't you come out here, stay with us, go back to school, see if because nothing's working out. Whatever you're doing there is not working out. Obviously, you're getting in the spiral of depression again and going down that. And I'm like, all right, probably right. I was on track to do the same thing, what I had been doing. It crossed my mind of like, maybe I can get into illegal activity. And I'm thinking, I'm like, oh, you're an idiot. Luckily, I caught myself. I'm like, I was going down that hole again that I had dug myself and I had gotten out of. Luckily, I had, gotten closer to my family, my inner circle, that they caught on, and I was open at least to listen to them. And I moved back out to Utah, and I've been here ever since. And I started school, and I started noticing, I'm like, finally, like my family, there's people around me. Why are they so happy? And I'm like, they don't really have a whole lot in my mind of these worldly pleasures. And like, hey, they're not successful in this, but they're happy. They have this family. And like, I'm like, what am I missing here? And I'm like, oh my gosh, going with the world isn't true happiness. And I never fully went away from the world. And I was like, okay, well, why not try humbling myself fully and embracing, the church and the gospel and fully embracing it. See what happens. What's the worst can happen? Like you can just be back where you were. I was like, all right, fine, let's go. And I'm like, all right. So that's where I slowly got my journey back in 2018, and I stopped drinking. A lot of my triggers from like other addictions are gone. We're in Utah. It's a lot easier on these triggers of like gambling and alcohol consumption. And I started surrounding myself with better groups that people that support, being sober. I had never been sober fully besides prison ever from alcohol. And so I was like, wow, this is great. I'm so much healthier. Well, why not, start going back to church? Well, I got a job that I worked on Sundays. I tried my best to like, maybe I'll go to another church that goes at a time like outside of my work, and I couldn't do that. And then finally my bishop opened up and he's like, hey, well, why don't we visit? And he worked with me and he worked with my schedule. And he's like, okay, well, let's see what we can do, because see if you can make it. And, I never thought that was a possibility. I always thought I was too afraid. A blessing of this bishop to open up. And I finally was humble enough to accept help and accept in opening up that, hey, yeah, I've had some issues, but I've let them away and I've stopped, but I just have a hard time of coming to church because I work. And then he slowly helped me as long as I come to the sacrament every, once a month or stuff like that. And I could kind of work with my work. And another blessing was I finally got the courage to even tell my work, like, hey, is there a possibility that I can, leave work and go to the sacrament? And he's like, yeah, it's fine. Yeah. I thought that wasn't a possibility. And slowly I was like, okay, awesome. And then from there it grew to, well, okay, I feel like I need to go to church on a regular basis, not just like once, every so often or just that hour and then go back to church. Finally got the courage where I was like, is there a possibility that I can't work on Sundays anymore? It's just conflicting with church. I can't do it. Is there something you can work with me? Otherwise, I resorted that I was going to just quit because I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do a little tiptoe, a little foot in the church, and while still being out.
You're an all-in person. You're all in, you're all out.
Yeah, and so I was like, all right, here we are, and I had committed to it. I was like, all right, well, here we go. It was amazing because it was blessing. They're like, oh no, well, we can accommodate you. We can work around your schedule. We can do that, no problem. Can you come in these days? And I was like, oh yeah, okay. And these small miracles that I never thought that I opened myself up to possibilities. And then I actually got off supervised release, and I could actually start to work toward becoming an elder, which I'd wanted to go to the temple and all these things. And growing up, and you're like, wow, this is great. All my siblings have gone through the temple. They've all been married in the temple. I never, was active. At that time when they got married, I never could go through the temple and I wanted to go through that. And I'd seen they're such great examples to me, and that's one of the reasons why it pushed me to go back into the to the church was because of them, because I saw how happy they were, and realizing there is happiness in following these commandments and being part of the church. And I wanted that, and that's the biggest thing that I'm like, hey, I want a family like that. That'd be awesome. I mean, obviously, what I've been doing isn't working, so um, anyways, yeah. So in like 2019, after about a year getting back into the church and working with my bishop and stuff, I was finally able to get ordained an elder. Well, I actually first blessed the sacrament. First time now I don't think even when I was a priest, when I was younger, I never blessed the sacrament. That was actually right when I fell away initially.
So it was your first time ever.
Ever. And so it was a strange feeling. It was like, whoa. And then from there, I made some time to, luckily my schedule with what I was working, I was able to go to baptisms to the dead with my bishop. And that was surreal because I remember doing that when I was so young, and it was a totally different experience. The amount of light that the temple brings, and I was just like, whoa. It's like breathtaking. And, it's the amount of blessings you get from just going to the temple. And at that time, I was just going to the baptism for the dead. So from there, I progressed and became, ordained an elder. Was able to I went to Bountiful Temple with my family. It was a long road, to say the least. It was that same embrace that I had felt before of having Heavenly Father Jesus wrap his arms around me and knowing you did it. You did a good job. You're here. And that embrace. So I got through the temple, and that's been a couple years now.
And I
But
read you go every week.
oh yeah, so that was like December 2019. Went to the Bountiful, and then I went to Salt Lake right before they closed.
Oh, awesome.
And yeah, and so I got an opportunity there, and then all of a sudden, COVID hit, and so it's like everything was not pressure to go, and you're like, all right, and then just in last year, I finally went back and did initiatories, and this whole time I had thought I was like, this perfectionist in me again. I had to be perfect. I had to be like, I had to remember everything. I had all these ordinances, all this, and that, and that caught me from wanting to go because and then it finally hit me after the first of the year. It's like, you don't have to be perfect. Everyone there at the temple is not perfect. We're all, fallen, and it's okay to mess up. And some things that helped me was when I first started going back, going to the temple on a regular basis, is we had the masks. So that was my like safeguard. Like, oh, if something messed up, whatever, hey, they didn't know me. So that was my little safety guard, in a sense. And it just progressed from where I was like, at first I was just like, my sister goes to the temple all the time, and she has all these names. And I was like, well, okay, I'll just get the names from her. And these walls came down of knowing that I don't have to be perfect. Hey, it's okay to mess up. It's not the end of the world, whatever you're doing. Understand you're there to serve, and you draw close to the Lord. And it brings so much happiness to me when I started at first this year was I wanted to go through all these different temples. We're in the north, in Salt Lake area. You're so close to all these temples. I'm like, why not? I started being like every week I'd go to another temple on my Saturday drive or whatever. I'd go to all these different ones. I was like, why not?
They have a temple passport. Someone in my family bought one for me. So it has all the Utah temples in it, and you put a little sticker like every time you go to a different temple, you should get one.
Yeah. And so it turned into awesome where I almost went to the most I've done in 1 week is 3 sessions,
Wow.
endowment sessions, because I do one on Friday, like right before work. I work in downtown Salt Lake, so I can hit the 6 o'clock session at a lot of times the Jordan River one. And then my Saturdays, I don't work on Saturdays, so I end up traveling wherever. And a lot of those ones that I've done two in a row. Like I've done Boise, Meridian, two in a row. I've done the Rexburg and Afton, the Star Valley one, same day. Yeah, I've done all within the distance of driving. I haven't done Monticello. That's quite the drive, but I've hit every other one. Cedar City, I did a baptism for the dead a while back, but yeah, I may just drive down there anyway for a session. But all the other ones, it's miraculous about the differences and nuances of how it's different for each temple. And at the end of the day, you're still serving and bringing those that have passed away an opportunity to partake of those sacred ordinances that they didn't have an opportunity here on in life. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So I take it how are you feeling today now that you have accomplished so much, you've come so far, you're going to the temple, like how's life now?
Oh, it's great. I mean, I still have to deal with my regular OCD and a lot of times where much like the devil knows how to get at you really hard. And one of the biggest things that I've dealt with a lot lately is understanding my path and not comparing it to others. And in Utah, it's hard not to compare yourself for where my path is, and I'm 35. But I finally opened up, and I still deal with like depression big time, and even suicidal thoughts at times. Coming back to my own path and understanding and having reverence and understanding that my timetable is not the same as the Lord's for me. I want something so bad, but my siblings have gotten married. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I'm 35. It's hard not to compare yourself to others, but at the same time, you understand I've gone through so many different situations that maybe my story can help someone else in the same situation. I have to watch myself. I'm an addict. Definitely an addict, and I have to watch my triggers. And one of it is being lonely. It's I take it day by day, and helps me a lot is going to the temple. That's one of the things that helps me is my refuge is going to the temple and serving. Not only that is I'm a Sunday school teacher. So yeah, to like 15, 16-year-olds. And it's a blessing, I think, more from my own perspective is because it forces me to get out of my comfort zone and open up to more the come follow me that maybe I wouldn't have been. How I can help them, especially because that's when I fell away at their age, and help them understand that to hopefully prevent them from going down the same path that I did. So
that's amazing. I think that there's a lot of people who will be able to relate to you. I don't think you have to be a drug dealer to relate to you. There's a lot of things that you think that you've spoken about that I know I have dealt with, and I know a lot of other people have. I think that you have a really incredible story, and I'm so excited to share it with everybody. It's so inspiring, and just to see like how happy you are. And even I watched like your face just light up. It was so different from the beginning of this episode to the end. It's like you're a different person just telling the story. Like you changed from your old self to your current self, and it's beautiful. It really is. And you reminded me of my journey, and the things that I felt were similar to you, even though I didn't have to go through the exact same things. And that I don't know you, but I am so proud of you. Like I just think you have such a great story. I'm so glad that you shared it with us. Do you have any last thoughts with you that you want to share? Any like spiritual insights or anything?
Yeah, we just went to conferences. One that touched me was when you're feeling lonely, reach to the Lord. Don't go the way of the world. Reach out to the Lord. Yoke with Him to gain strength, and you will feel stronger and be able to accomplish anything that comes your way. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being a supporter of the Comeback Podcast and listening to our episodes. It would mean so much to us if you would like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It helps other people be able to find us, and we want to share this message to everyone.